We're going to start animating our restore video, and the first thing we have is this shape on the very first kind of screen. This shape and the word your bounces in, kind of hinges in this way. I'm going to show you what that looks like if you remember on the video. So that's what we're going for, and this is how we're going to do that. So on my on my board here, I have made all of the layers invisible except for the your and the shape. And those are grouped together so they come in as an Illustrator layer, and those will stay together. So the first thing I want to do is when I want this to rotate in. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. So I want to take my anchor point here and move that, because right now if I swivel it, it will just swivel on itself in a circle. So I'm going to go up here into the control bar here and choose that anchor point tool. Click and drag on my center anchor point. I'm going to put it off the screen here, the white area that we see. And that will allow me, when I rotate it, to rotate it on this point instead of on the center point. So we'll go down here in our layer and click on rotation. And I am going to go to my rotate tool up here in the control. I'll simply click on this and holding my shift key down, see how it goes from 0 to 45 to 90, and I'll move it up to 90. So that will be my first position, and then it will kind of hinge in. So on my rotation here, I'm going to set my first keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch, and that sets this position 90 degrees. Actually, in this case, it's negative 90 degrees. That sets my first position. Now I'll move my timeline indicator over to about 2 seconds, and I'll set my second keyframe by clicking here. And now I'm going to rotate this back down by clicking and dragging, but remember to hold your shift key so we go from that negative 90, negative 45 back to 0. And that allows us to form that transition. You see, if we scrub through that on our timeline, it comes in and stops. Now that looks nice, and I think that looks pretty good, but you'll notice on mine how it bounces a little bit at the end. Just a little bit. I actually wouldn't mind if that bounce was exaggerated a little bit more. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open this up down here, the timeline, and what we're going to do is on our layer here, the rotation, I'm going to control click, go down to Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. And before I do that, let me show you what that does. So this kind of tween right here where it goes from off the screen here and sets that motion. Right now, if I click on this little graph editor here, this will show me that that transition is just basically a nice clean straight line. So that can be not so much here, but that can be a little bit harsh when you look at things as far as you want a more fluid motion in moving something else. So this is good practice just to start with. But what I'm going to do is when I hold my control key and click on the Keyframe Assistant, oops, I need to be back out of there, sorry. I'm going to choose Easy Ease. What will happen is, see these change? They almost look like little hourglasses that are smoother on the side. Now when I click on my graph editor, you'll see that it has changed that straight line to a nice curve, which we don't notice it much here, but it eases in a little bit nicer, and it gives us a couple other options. So one of these options, by the way, I'm just going to increase my timeline here by clicking from the smaller mountains to the larger mountains to zoom in, so you can see this a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this anchor point up here, and where it's at 0 degrees, which would be 0 degrees, remember when we rotated it down from negative 90, negative 45 to 0, I'm going to lift this handle, and so my curve goes above that 0 degrees. So you have this little bit right here that's going above. What that's going to do is that's going to push this down as it goes through this transition, push it down below 0 degrees. So now watch this. It'll bounce in. See how it bounces in just a little bit? So we have a nice smooth transition, but at the end it kind of bounces in, which I think looks a little bit better. So I'm going to reduce this back down to normal size, and it doesn't have to be quite as much of a bounce. We can reduce it just a little bit, and now when we bring it in, it still bounces. So there's our first element coming in and our first element bouncing in. Thank you.